Well, welcome back to my type 2 diabetes journey. My name is Ira Feuerstein, and if you watched the last episode, you know the truth. Almost everything we've been told about type 2 diabetes is wrong. We broke down the biggest lies keeping people sick, how diabetes isn't just a blood sugar problem, how it's not just about eating too much sugar, and how it only gets worse if you don't fix the root cause. Now, if you missed that episode, go watch it now. I'll put it down in the link below in the description. It'll completely change the way you think about diabetes. And you'll find the whole playlist link below also. You can watch it after this one, of course. But now that we know that the system is broken, the real question is, what do we do about it? Because if you go to a regular doctor, they're going to follow one approach. It's called the standard of care. But what if I told you there just might be a better way? Well, today, we're breaking down the two completely different ways to treat diabetes. First is the standard medical approach. And second, as a comparison, will be something called functional medicine. One of those just manages your symptoms. The other actually looks for the cause. And by the end of this episode, you'll know which one I'm using and why it's the only real way out, in my opinion. Now, before we dive in, hit that subscribe button, turn on that bell icon so you don't miss the rest of the journey. We're just getting started here. So let's start with what happens when you go to a regular doctor after being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. What happens? Well, step one, they check two things, your A1C and your fasting glucose. Now, if your numbers are high, boom, you are diabetic. Welcome to the club. Not a great club to be in, actually. Step two, they write you a prescription. Usually it's metformin first. Maybe later they add another drug, maybe even insulin at some point. And if your numbers keep climbing, well, they just keep increasing the doses. Step three, they tell you you need to eat better. You need to exercise. But no one ever tells you how. Maybe they hand you some just generic pamphlet about a healthy diet and send you on your way with the food pyramid. And don't get me started on the food pyramid. It's completely backwards. We'll get into that in another episode. And that's it. That's the standard of care. Now let that sink in for a minute. Does any of that actually fix the problem? In my opinion, no. It's all about managing blood sugar, but if you remember from the last episode, diabetes isn't just about blood sugar. It's actually about metabolic dysfunction. Something is going wrong in your body. And guess what? The standard of care model never even looks at that. And here's where it gets even worse, because this system, it's a whirlpool. You can't escape. It starts with one medication, then that stops working. And instead of asking why, they just give you a higher dose. Or then another med, then another. Before you know it, you're taking 2, 3, 4 different drugs. And your diabetes still isn't under control. And they're not fixing anything. They're just chasing numbers. Your A1C goes up, increase the dose. Your fasting glucose is still too high, add another med. Now, the worst part is the longer it goes on, the worse your diabetes gets. Remember, we talked about this being a progressive disease because they're treating the symptom, not the root cause. So your body keeps breaking down. Now, to me, that's not health care. That's sick care. It's disease management. And that is how people get trapped in diabetes for life. Not because diabetes is progressive, but because the system never actually works to reverse it. It's almost like they're allowing you to go down that whirlpool, and no one ever stands back and says, why? Why is this happening? How do we fix what's actually causing it? Now, let me give you an analogy here. I think I'll make it super easy. Imagine your house is flooding. Water is pouring in everywhere. The standard of care approach, it's like handing you a mop and saying, hey, here you go. Just keep cleaning it up. Eventually you'll get all the water up. But what's the real problem? You know, it's a busted pipe. And if you don't fix the pipe, the flooding never stops. You can mop all day long, but the water keeps coming back. That's exactly what happens when doctors only treat blood sugar without fixing insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction. You're just mopping up the symptoms while the root cause gets worse and worse and worse. And that's why so many people get stuck on more and more medication, because they're never actually fixing the leak. All right, so if the standard of care is all about managing symptoms, then what's the other option? Is there another option? Well, yeah, I mean, there really is. It's called functional medicine. That's where that comes in. And let me tell you, this approach is completely different. And as you know, I'm just starting down the path right now with a functional medicine doctor. Just got my blood work done. We're going to go through that in a future episode. But what I love about it so far is functional medicine doesn't just look at blood sugar. It looks at everything that that could be causing your diabetes. Instead of saying, hey, let's just lower the blood sugar, it asks, why is your blood sugar high in the first place? And that's the question that actually can lead to answers. Now, when I started working with a functional medicine doctor, the first thing they did was run tests, real tests, not just that A1C and fasting glucose. They ran tests for over 80 different markers. Things like fasting insulin. Why? Because insulin resistance happens years before your blood sugar even goes up. They look for inflammation markers because chronic inflammation makes diabetes worse. Number 3, liver function tests, because your liver plays a huge role in blood sugar control. Your nutrient levels, because deficiencies in things like magnesium, vitamin D, and omega-3s can make insulin resistance even worse. And then the one that I was blown away by, that I really didn't have any clue existed, was this topic of toxin exposure. Because heavy metals and environmental toxins can actually interfere with insulin signaling. Who would have thunk it? The result is I finally started seeing the bigger picture. Listen, I'm not saying doctors are bad. As a matter of fact, I just went to a doctor here this morning. They're doing what they've been trained to do. But the problem is that the system they're working in is designed to manage disease, not fix it. And that's how it's always been, and that's how it's going to be until somebody stands up and says, hey, you guys need to learn a little bit more. So that's why I finally made the choice to choose functional medicine, because I don't want to be stuck in a cycle of medication, increasing dosages, declining health. I want to fix the problem. And that's exactly what I'm out to do. So now, I want to hear from you. Comments below. Have you ever had a doctor actually test for the root cause of your diabetes? Or were they just focused on your numbers? Drop a comment below. I read every single one and I respond to almost all. Now in the next episode, we're going to go even deeper. I'm going to break down the real cause of diabetes, why your cells are rejecting sugar, and what we can do about it. So make sure you're subscribed, have that bell icon turned on, and of course, if you haven't watched episode 1 or 2 yet, check out the playlist now. Those episodes lay the foundation for everything we're talking about. See you in episode 4. Thanks for joining.